Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021, and we're fighting with the mute button again today. Ready for another show? Doesn't matter. Ha! Time has come upon us anyway. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, and as usual, beating us to the punch is Bill in Portland, Maine, who says, let's hear what's going to happen today. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, informs us that Kagro and Kagro vaccine has been pulled on account of it's made from lizard spleens and dryer lint. I have plenty of dryer lint. That's entirely possible. The good news is it still makes a tasty afternoon snack. Ugh. Okay, fine. Why not? You know, we'll spend some time on the topic. Greg Dworkin joins us again for the regular Wednesday appearance, and I'm sure there'll be a chance to talk about what's going on with Johnson & Johnson and whether or not you should worry about it. Or in fact, I think I saw one of the articles that he was enjoying circulating this morning, somebody asking the question if my Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been canceled, how mad should I be about that? It's a good question. We finally did get a hold of our son at school the other day and talk about vaccines. He's surprisingly informed and up to date on the news, kind of, with respect to the vaccines, although he seemed to be caught by surprise somehow by the news that the Johnson & Johnson vaccines had in fact been paused. But he was up to date on what some of the issues surrounding the various vaccines were, and was seemed to be involving himself in trying to make some sort of intelligent guess about which vaccine, if any, he might have a preference for, although it's not entirely clear that there's any actual choice presented to him. But there you have it. So whatever. What we'll take away from it and be happy about is the fact that he was paying attention to the vaccine and what was going on market-wise, and that there was an imperative to get one, although he is himself strangely vaccine hesitant, although, having raised him, I recall, for different reasons why he might be vaccine hesitant. Getting stuck with needles is uncomfortable and unfun, but he's sort of at the age where that isn't really the major contributing factor anymore. But just generally, the idea of just injecting stuff into you on the basis of some hastily conducted trials, etc. Okay, well, I guess I have that sort of hesitancy too. But then on the other hand, okay, yeah, I'm hesitant. But go ahead. Yes or no? Stick me with the needle? Yes. Okay. Well, we'll catch up with Greg Dworkin about the latest on that front, I am sure. And I know I've seen his raft of articles includes lots about it. What else do we have to share with you over the last couple of hours of news gathering? Well, actually, we could throw it back to a couple of days ago. I have some interesting comments from people listening to the show the other day to add to our roundup. One of them actually rather lengthy and worthy of taking a look at, but perhaps later, as we want to leave things open for Greg's discussion. But also I think occupying my time this morning, I noticed an article being circulated in, what was it? Slate? Yeah, Slate. Circulating this article about office reopening, and everybody's getting around to that topic these days. It's a very hot topic. Oh, look, they also have been overtaken by disgusting-looking earwax ads. I don't know why they're doing this. This is a very disturbing thing to do. They shouldn't do it until the afternoon. Anyway, lots of discussion about the politics and health effects and psychological effects, economic effects of reopening the office. Lots of discussion about whether it's even worth reopening offices. I'm sure a lot of companies are going to be cutting their expenses by jettisoning as much office space as they can. something that they usually reserve for cutting workers rather than cutting office space. But now they'll be able to some extent. And I guess we'll have to examine this politically and whether we want this to go forward and how we want to treat it tax-wise. But they'll be able to shunt off a lot of their expenses for physical office space back onto the backs of their workers, who will have to provide their own working space at home. And this will, of course, happen in the name of convenience to the employee, because they really do, generally speaking, probably, in many cases anyway, want to continue working from home at least part of the week. That's been the dynamics as I hear the discussion about my wife's return to work, and she has some hand in that, and people are beginning to express their opinions. And I guess that now we're at the point where that stuff begins to work its way up the food chain until it gets to the level where they don't care anymore, and then throw it all out and impose something from the top down. But, well, hopefully we're all sensitive to this. This article, though, was about reopening, and it was, they grabbed for the headline, I guess, a pull quote from inside the article, somebody that they must have spoken to. I like this. It's interesting. "I do not trust people in the same way, and I don't think I ever will again." The subheader is, "Workers are really, really not ready for offices to reopen." And it struck me that I don't think that they meant it in exactly the same way that I took it. But yeah, I don't think I will trust people in the same way again either. And part of that is pandemic related, partially, of course, for the same reasons, I think, because I know I've learned that you can't really necessarily just trust everybody to be, let's say, as careful as you think you're being, even though they probably think the same thing about you. But it occurred to me, well, many people I won't trust anymore, because I've now learned that the so-called respectable people in society could turn out to be anti-science cranks and weirdos, or people who have adopted the position that they're going to purposefully not be careful about the pandemic because of their political beliefs, and that some of them may in fact be anti-democracy insurrectionists as well. Things that we used to simply dismiss as being, well, it's true that such and such a person at the office, or my boss, or the ownership of the company is Republican. But that's, as much as I disagree with them, a normal thing to be. But now that it's no longer a normal thing to be, I don't know if I trust going back to the office on their say-so, especially if they have spent their time lobbying for and winning immunity from any liability should I get sick if I go back to work for them. I now find out that they never believed that this pandemic was dangerous in the first place, and that it should all be on my shoulders to carry the economy. But if I happen to get sick doing it, F you, and we'll cut off your insurance and fire you, I might not want to go back so quickly. So we have some interesting behavioral economics questions facing us today. But first, I don't know, probably vaccine. What's up, Greg? How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Okay. Still good. No, after effects.
So I didn't go on the show yesterday, and yesterday was the day that Twitter exploded in outrage because everybody was stupid, and this is a disaster, and Johnson & Johnson came out with stuff, and, it was kind of interesting. Of course, it all kind of calmed down by about 2 p.m., largely because there was a very effective CDC FDA news conference.
Oh, okay.
It took place around 10 o'clock. The problem that they did yesterday, what they did wrong, is they put out this news bulletin press release around 7 a.m., and then the press conference was 10 a.m., and so there was this 3-hour gap. And that 3-hour gap, of course, was filled with experts, not so experts, and everybody else weighing in on what they thought it meant without really knowing what it meant. And so, a lot of outrage led by Nate Silver, who said it was a disaster, and then people yelling at Nate Silver, "Why don't you stay in your lane?" And Nate Silver saying, "It is my lane."
They're all my lanes.
Statistical analysis of risk and risk communication of that statistical analysis to the public. So it's my lane. No, it's not your lane. Yes, it is. What do you know about this? So it was kind of dumb, but by looking at it, there were some very important underlying issues, I think, that were covered. Okay. And the two best pieces that I've come across so far in terms of covering them was the 40,000 foot view of media by John Alsop in CJR, Columbia Journalism Review, and the more personal look about what it meant by Bill Scher. So which do you want to do first, the overall or the personal?
Do the 50,000 foot view and then plummet to our
disaster, right?
Yeah.
So in Media Today, Columbia Journalism Review, John Alsop writes, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine pause and the media's role in communicating risk. And goes through what happened, and we can talk about that. But, to put it in a nutshell, the FDA and the CDC, but predominantly FDA's job, did post-marketing, that is to say, after it comes on market, surveillance through their vaccine reporting system, which has existed for a long time, and picked up 6 cases in 7 million doses of blood clots in the brain, which were very unusual. And they were unusual because they happened in the setting where your platelets go down. Your platelets are there to clot, but your platelets are going down, not up, and you're clotting anyway. And that's important for clinicians because it's associated with a completely different way of treating it. You don't use heparin or anticoagulants. That makes it worse. And that's an important thing for clinicians to know. So the FDA got this information and said, what do we do with this? We need to let clinicians know that this thing exists. We need to let patients know that they need to be on the lookout if they've had a J&J, if they're under 50, if they're women, whoever the risk group is. If you have severe headaches, abdominal pain, leg pain, shortness of breath, and you've had the vaccine within 2 weeks, which is when this happens, then go talk to your doctor. If you've had the vaccine a month ago, don't worry about it because it happens within 2 weeks. So they needed to get this information out to everybody quickly. And they also needed to take a look and see, is it just 6 in 7 million? This sounds like 1 in a million. It's not that much, but the vaccine is new. It just went on the market recently. Are there going to be more? And if we find more, how many are there? And is it okay to let the vaccine go on without seemingly doing anything if it turns out more cases are there? Not doing anything has a risk. So they were balancing the need to let clinicians know, the need to at least let their advisory committee, which meets today, the American, whatever they call it, ACIP, the American Infectious Disease Practices Group, which advises CDC, is going to meet today and come up with a recommendation. And that recommendation might be like in Europe with AstraZeneca, which has similar issues. It might be only give the vaccine to people over 30 or over 60. Different countries in Europe are doing it different ways, but they're limiting who they give it to. Or they might say, okay, we looked at it. It's real but rare. And so we're simply alerting people, this is what you watch for. We're doing it anyway. We're still going ahead because the benefits of the vaccine vastly outweigh the risk, which every expert and non-expert on Twitter pointed out yesterday is true. But that being the case, we still continue the vaccine, but it's our job as patient safety advocates to inform people this is the risk. We have to rewrite all the little pieces of paper that you throw out after you get your vaccine so that it's on there, and that we tell you these are the things to watch for in the next 2 weeks. And so we need 24 hours to do that. And so they took a pause so that they could get 24 hours. And, 24 hours isn't enough. And 2 hours between the press release and the press conference yesterday was too long. And so you have to balance all these things. So that's the background to what's going on with J&J. And as this is happening, this Columbia Journalism Review article points out there were specifically loud voices here saying that your hopes that this should give confidence to the fact that we're looking, the regulatory people picked up an issue, they're on it, They're going to deal with it in a forthright, transparent, and timely manner in some sort of alternate universe where these things matter. Should be a good thing.
Yeah.
And then the split here, which this article clearly points out, but was obvious yesterday, between the health people and the scientists and the doctors who are saying, okay, good, they did this, and the political people saying, this is a disaster, it's terrible messaging, what is this going to say?
The optics.
Because political people are used to, if you do the slightest thing wrong, your opponents are going to run with it and then make this we're going to destroy your reputation based on this kind of thing, because that's what they do for a living.
That's true, right?
Right, and in fact, there's a great example of that, which I can give you, and that is the frustration. It's in Political Playbook, but it's also in The Guardian, with Republicans having problems about how to deal with Joe Biden.
Oh.
Another staffer, says Political Playbook, for one of the group of 10 senators who, Republicans and Democrats who are trying, I guess Republicans and Joe Manchin. I'm not sure exactly who the 10 senators are. I think they're mostly Republicans who are, 10 group of 10 Republican senators who insist they're itching to negotiate deals with the White House. This isn't Collins at all, but only on the Republican side, not including Manchin. Okay,
yeah,
that's
the 10 we would need to overcome a filibuster, I guess, is supposed to be the idea.
The staffer says you would be hard-pressed to find anybody on our side of the aisle that thinks this will end up any differently than last time if we go in and try to do a White House meeting on infrastructure. It'll wind up the same way as the COVID bill will be used as political props.
Okay.
The staffer who lamented the nightmare of it all had grudging respect for how effectively Biden had played this so far. Everything they support is defined as either COVID relief or infrastructure, and everything they oppose is like Jim Crow voter suppression and evil. And you constantly just feel like you're in this gaslighting chamber of insanity, but it's working. It's working because it's true.
Being gaslighted about this? Yeah.
They in their
That's
heads really believe that they're there to negotiate, but their idea of negotiating is do it our way. They get really upset when Chuck Schumer says they didn't move an inch. They feel like they did, and so now they're all insulted. But the fact of the matter is that if they really want bipartisanship, they have to be serious about negotiating, because there's so much truth to the fact that they were all in to saying no. And this article goes on to say they see a White House constantly rubbing dirt in the face of Republicans over the party's lack of interest in bipartisanship while passing as many partisan bills as they possibly can through reconciliation. Two episodes stand out to them. One was the COVID bill, and then the second episode said the 10 senators didn't move an inch. So the thing is, they admit there's a lot of truth to it, but it's not quite the story. So to them, it's an effing nightmare, and that's a quote.
Okay. I like that, too. We're going to do as many bills as we can under reconciliation. Well, there's been one.
Right.
What a nightmare.
But as Andrew Feinberg points out, and this is from, I'm sorry, not The Guardian, but The Independent, here's the quote. You'll never get anybody to admit this on the record, but it's really effing hard to drive down the negatives of an affable, gentlemanly white man who says nice positive things most of the time, a veteran Republican consultant said of Joe Biden.
Oh, okay.
They really meant driving negatives up, and I'm not going to tell them that.
Yes, true. And, of course, this is a huge surprise to the party of Ronald Reagan.
Right. So the point is, this is the framework, this is the lens through which political people see everything. And so when you have a nuanced situation which calls for balance and restraint, that's not them. They don't do that. Yeah. And so if you give them 3 hours of open space, they're going to fill it with, this is a disaster. This is a messaging disaster. This is terrible. You shouldn't have done this. What a huge mistake, when they don't know what they're talking about.
Well, they need.
And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened yesterday. And by the afternoon, things had calmed down considerably, and things look quite a bit better. So getting back to this CJR article here, as the day went on, Nate Silver of the data-driven news site 538 observed a split of sorts. People in the public health sphere seem to be pretty agnostic on what effect the J&J pause will have on vaccine hesitancy, maybe leaning toward it being a slight positive, while the sentiment of people who cover politics and media is toward it being a clear negative. Silver, who's in the latter camp, stressed he could be wrong, which is nice, but noted that both camps had relevant expertise given how much COVID is the political media focal point. As somebody who covers media but has limited public health expertise, my initial thoughts ran along Silver's. The idea that a pause will boost confidence seems to me, the guy writing the article, to assume that skeptics will interpret it and its attendant nuances rationally and not freak out about the alarming signal sent by the decision. Transparency is essential, but officials can be transparent about issues with the vaccine without suspending it. If anything, the pause recommendation was as much an act of amplification, turning exceedingly rare incidents into a wall-to-wall news story. It was deliberate amplification because they wanted to let the clinicians know what I told you in the beginning, that this is completely different and you better get word on it fast out to everybody. And if you think the clinicians in the office spend their time reading New England Journal articles to catch up on everything by the evening that it's published, let me tell you about how things really work.
Yeah,
you want everybody to know, you do it this way.
That's true. That's an excellent point. I mean, I don't know how you manage it necessarily, but wow. Yeah, I mean, everybody was spitting coffee in the morning, and by the time any clinicians had gotten to the hospital to treat anybody that might have these symptoms, everybody knew exactly where to go to look
up.
Which
was
right,
the point,
and
that's why they did that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as we have seen, for example, with masks, the messaging judgments of health officials are open to question, and that's true. Ezra Klein, now of the New York Times, noted yesterday there's no actual evidence the FDA knows how to manage public psychology correctly on this, which is also true. Yeah. But as the author says, then again, I could be wrong. Most of the debate about the pause in vaccine confidence has been rooted in speculative behavioral assumptions that may not play out as we expect, which is to say that the so-called political pundit experts are no better at this than they are about calling elections.
Oh, well, okay. That may be
right.
True.
And G. Elliott Morris points out, relentlessly tweeting, "Oh my God, why would the CDC do something so stupid?" which is exactly what happened yesterday morning, is not really the way to convince people who are skeptical of scientists or medical institutions that the vaccine is safe. It's possible to go around in circles here to forget that science here is complicated and contested, and that public confidence is far from the only reason for the pause. There's a multiplicity of factors to consider, including official reassurances that suspending J&J won't impede the overall vaccine rollout, and the fact that pauses are common after a new medical product goes on the market. But this isn't normal, and our choices on what we choose and how to highlight them matter. Since COVID vaccines come online, experts have advised news organizations not to hype stories about rare potential side effects. Officials acting dramatically on such incidents is clearly a big deal, and it's a big story, which is true. Nobody's saying don't cover it. But their actions do not in themselves change the underlying available data. So how should we think about reconciling these contradictory newsworthy dynamics? And they talk about the fact that opposing it to various, famous commentary experts on publishing and media is you can stress various things and such. But the point is that this bothers reporters, because reporters, on the one hand, really like to have science consensus on things, because reporting it therefore makes them sound like an expert. Okay.
Not client, but okay.
And here's the direct quote. "There's no easy fail-safe answers here. The J&J pause is yet another example of a profound media challenge that I've explored through the pandemic. The absence of certainty and the ready-made expert consensus within a media ecosystem that prizes both things." So if you're not certain about it, and if you don't have a consensus, then it's hard in the reporters' minds who know nothing about the topic to report on this with the certainty that they are used to doing on everything. It's really hard for them.
Yes.
You get on and you say, well, this is what's going on. Well, how do you know? You don't know anything about this. Well, the experts all agree, and I'm telling you what they're saying. Well, what if they don't agree? How do you sort out which experts are right? Well, next, that's all the time we have for this story today. Let's go on to some lighthearted story about a panda hugging a kid, whatever. Because that's like the last 10 minutes of every national news is light stories. You only get the news in the first 15 minutes.
I guess so. Well, I'm used to it, but in the form of everybody knows that it takes 60 votes to do anything in the Senate, or there's only one reconciliation bill allowed in a year. Well, you sound like
so they had their issue, and it was hard. So I thought that Bill Scher summed it up very well. And by the way, I'll just add one thing. The people I really feel worst about because there is plenty of vaccine to go around, and the people who got the J&J vaccination appointments will get other appointments. But the people I feel worst about are the colleges and schools that had thousands of people lined up today, tomorrow, and this week to get these one-and-done shots in a population which is then going to scatter.
Right. That's why it was so smart for them to pick up those J&J shots.
Right, and it made sense. And that really gets spoiled. And that's really hard to say, okay, well, we'll just reschedule with the 2-shot thing. It's not the same.
Yeah, we're going through it right now.
Yeah, so you know. So that's not included in Bill Schur's story, but I wanted to mention that because I think it's real. And, of course, you can verify it's real because, like, it can happen to you. Because everybody knows a good editor knows what news is. It's what happened to me on the way to work today.
It's true. And with my shortened commute, there's less and less that gets through.
Right. So my Johnson & Johnson vaccination was canceled. How mad should I be, writes Bill Schur.
Okay.
Part of me gets the need to balance risk. Part of me wants to scream.
Oh, okay. Well,
so he gets it. He understands why it's happening.
Yeah. And, of course, we run up against our break, but yeah.
But, we'll do more of this after the break. And he also relates it to Biden's overall governing strategy because yelling at it or criticizing it or supporting it fails to capture the complexities of governing. The same is true with public health.
Okay. I believe it. And you'll believe it, too, if you don't now. But you'll have to wait 2 minutes to find out why you believe it. And then we'll come back and do that. All right. Be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, well, I no longer am sure exactly. Now I've got everything so crossed up that I no longer am sure whether or not I've timed the breakout correctly, incorrectly. Maybe I made a mistake about this whole thing. The complexities of governing this show, Greg, are very difficult, and I no longer know exactly what's going on. I believe we're now back on.
Well, we always tell people do not do this at home, and look at you. You're doing it at home. That's the whole thing right there in a nutshell.
It's quite bizarre. Okay, and so we might be back. We might not be back. I'll have to ask Justice exactly how things are going. Maybe Scott can give me some indication. Very odd.
Luckily it's Friday, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, right. So we'll just close this out entirely. Yeah, things are different here today at home, slightly different routine. And I thought there would be no problem in implementing it, but apparently there is.
And that's what J&J said.
Has not changed. Yeah, right. Okay, good. So now I understand exactly what they're facing. Except
I thought we had no problem implementing. Oh, this thing came up. We better adjust this on the fly. Let's see how good it is.
I'm having blood clots. It may be right now. Something's happening in my brain. It might be blood clots. I don't know. But it's affecting the way
you didn't get the J&J. And one of the important points that they did want to stress is that the other vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna, are not subject to this. So all vaccines are not the same. We had a discussion some weeks ago about the messaging, that it's not fair or right to say all vaccines are the same. They're not. They're different.
It's not right to say
they're all good. We said that. We had that show. And this proves the point. You don't get these blood clot issues with the mRNA vaccines.
Okay. What do you get?
You get protected from COVID.
Oh. Well, that happens with the other one, too.
But you also get a sore arm and you get some side effects that generally are pretty mild.
Okay. Well, I didn't.
Anyway.
Yeah.
C. Michael Gibson, a very prominent physician on Twitter and elsewhere. Americans should be reassured that the FDA, CDC are monitoring vaccine side effects so closely that they detected a 1 in a million risk. I'm confident they'll craft an evidence-based response that balances safety and effectiveness to maximize public health overall. generally speaking, yeah, that sounds anodyne, but I have to tell you that's the reaction from most of the docs and the public health people, which is very, very different than the political people. So in talking about this, Bill Scher writes, government officials make choices where no matter what course of action they take, some people die. And it can seem like the right course is to follow the logic of John Stuart Mill or Spock in Star Trek II, as he sacrifices himself. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, but Captain Kirk's reasoning in Star Trek III is the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. So Kirk was speaking on the importance of friendship, but the Biden administration is likely also looking beyond the raw body count and considering an additional ethical factor in each vaccine scenario: who would directly be responsible for the deaths? The old trolley car problem.
Yes.
If people died of blood clots because the federal government encouraged the use of a vaccine with a known clotting risk, then the federal government would have been directly responsible. Yes. But if I get COVID-19 before May 21st, it will be because I have engaged in some sort of risky behavior in defiance of other government instructions. Right?
Maybe.
Nonetheless, if anybody who had been scheduled for the J&J vaccine dies, then the Biden administration will get horsewhipped, because if more vaccinated people die from blood clots, that'll happen too. So there's no risk-free political path. Right. And that's why simplistic analysis of Biden's overall governing strategy failed to capture the complexities of governing. And also the fact that you have these destroy your reputation for a living people on the other side, just itching to find the smallest possible thing to pillory you on, because that's what they do for a living. They're professionals.
Yeah.
Right? They're professional assassins. I mean, you don't call it anything else. So they're out there, and so you got to manage all that stuff. So politicians have to have thick hides, and public health people have learned to grow thick hides over the last decade or so.
Right. They'll try and assassinate you, but that's as an exercise in helping you grow a thick hide.
Which is why Tony Fauci still has protection, because people have threatened to do exactly that. So in the case of the blood clot issue, the FDA and CDC concluded, writes Bill Scher, they needed to know more before they could encourage more jabs. Ezra Klein in his Twitter thread weighed the information differently, but there's no definitive right or wrong answer, and some faction of people will be displeased, and some people will become sick and die, whatever course is taken. And that's why a strategy of better people's lives immediately through competent governance is hardly foolproof, because competence, while obviously desirable, doesn't prevent grappling with governmental Sophie's choices and doesn't immunize governments from criticism when imperfect and unsatisfying decisions have to be made. So the Trumpian disdain for expertise has obvious flaws, but the one advantage is it keeps people's expectations really low.
Well, okay.
When you run on competence, people want governmental perfection, which is utopian, unattainable, or mere excellence, which is tough enough as it is. So in conclusion, when he thinks about what it means for him personally, having to give up his slot, to what it means for the country, Bill Scher says, I'm going to shelve my initial anger, mask up, wait another month. I'll remind myself liberal government can inspire and deliver, but at times it'll inevitably disappoint. Politicians aren't perfect. Fauci isn't perfect. And let me fetch, to paraphrase Hamilton, I can't believe they're giving away my shot.
What? Okay. How is that a paraphrase? Okay. All right. Oh, that Hamilton, like the fake Broadway Hamilton.
Like the Broadway Hamilton.
I'm like, what? Okay.
Right.
I got it. All right.
So that's basically what happened over the last 24 hours, and you saw it all play out in real time. It was really kind of fascinating. But, the whole idea of screaming at people because they're stupid, and I mean, people are not patient at this particular point. Totally understandable. They're not going to give you some slack. They are upset. They're worried, if not outright scared. And all you have to do is open the paper or look on Twitter and find half a dozen other things that are upsetting and scary too. So it's nice to have some certainty, and having the uncertainty upended when you thought you had just gotten this one in the certainty bucket is really disconcerting, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, we're all disconcerted. That is what it is. We know that much.
Questions, concerns, comments?
I don't know. I was grabbed by the inclusion of the word horsewhipped, which doesn't come up a whole lot. That was kind of distracting.
Well, caned is a thing.
Yeah, true, right. Who do you horsewhip if the problem is, and is it okay to horsewhip people if they are taking horse medication to prevent themselves from catching COVID. Is the latest kook trend out there. I learned just the other day.
So other things are happening, which are worth mentioning, not just that.
Comment, but,
By the way, just the figure in the government competence folder, another survey, this one from YouGov, about expected elements of Biden's infrastructure families plans finds every item has support from the majority of the public. So as they like to say at Harvard, infrastructure, schminfrastructure, the people want it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you call it. Listen to these numbers. This is favor versus oppose.
All right. Go ahead.
Investing in the construction of roads, bridges, rail lines, ports, and improvements to the electric grid and other parts of the power sector, 72% favor. And by the way, Bill Cassidy says he and his fellow Republicans are getting together to try to get Biden to spend more on roads and bridges.
All right.
Good. You're welcome. Come on.
We'll do it.
Let's talk.
That's our concession to you, and to you, Abby, as well. Treats and bridges. But, okay, does that count as a concession? Does that mean Manchin will get on board? We've conceded to him?
I hope so.
All right.
So let's look at something else. Investing in clean energy to reduce carbon emissions and combat climate change, 60% favor.
All right. It's
only 25% opposed.
Okay.
Therefore, it must be infrastructure, right?
Sure.
Increasing funding for rural broadband internet access.
No, that's stupid.
61% favor, only 19% opposed.
Okay, fine.
Building 1 million affordable and energy efficient housing units, 52% in favor.
Interesting.
Okay, making community college free for all Americans, 51% favor, only 32 opposed.
Okay,
universal pre-K, 58% favor.
I mean, I can understand why people don't look at it as an infrastructure, but it is.
51% favor creating a national paid family leave program, only 27% opposed. Creating subsidies that would reduce the cost of childcare, 60% favor, only 22% opposed.
More people have that problem. That's why.
Right, and expanding subsidies for buying health insurance, 58% favor, 23% opposed. These are popular items, and that's why the Republicans are going nuts trying to figure out how to get Biden's unfavorables up and his favorables down. It's not working because if you turn to policy, we're on the wrong side of everything, aren't we? Right, and that's why those 10 Republicans are just like going nuts trying to figure out what to do. The things that you want to do, Republicans, are not popular with the public. So you now not only don't have the votes, you also don't have the public behind you. So why don't you change?
I guess that maybe brings that we could use that as a transition to the Republicans losing support of corporate America.
Yeah, that's a great one. So I did a whole thing on that on Monday on the Pundit Roundup, and here's one from the New York Times. Hundreds of companies unite to oppose voting limits, but others abstain. Amazon, Google, GM, and Starbucks were among those joining the biggest show of solidarity. While at the same time, there is this Politico headline, which is Biden moves to leverage corporate America's falling out with the GOP. While the president and his team see a traditional foe, they also see an opportunity to leverage increasingly socially conscious boardrooms. Now, did you think you'd see that headline last year?
No.
Corporations side with Democrats.
Yeah, I didn't.
How bad are Republicans that corporations are siding with Democrats? You know they still want the tax breaks.
Yeah. They may get some.
Yeah. So Carl Quintanilla retweeted that with, today in headlines you didn't think you'd ever see.
True. But yeah, I've been pondering that in the last couple of days as well, and just thinking that the essential problem here is that the falling out between the two. I mean, not only that it was exacerbated by comments like Mitch McConnell's, if not his in particular, as the stories alleged the other day. They're not playing the same game, and maybe they never have been playing the same game, but they aren't playing it now. There's an artificial construct that's available to Republican politicians that just isn't available to corporations, which is if we aren't popular, we should just excise that segment of the population that we're not popular with from the citizenry, and then we'll be popular again. That it makes you can actually survive in a political context by giving yourself a larger share of a shrinking pie, which is not a concept that works in free market economics. And that's where corporations live. And if you can't make it work for them, they're not going to back you in your political construct either.
So speaking of corporations and businesses and political games and other games, help me with this one.
All right.
The National Collegiate Athletic Association says it will move championship events out of states that discriminate against LGBTQ people. The warning was directed at lawmakers considering bans on transgender athlete participation in college sports. So, is this a business decision or an amateur decision? Or is this businesses getting involved in politics? Or is it gamesmanship? How do you classify this?
It is infrastructure.
Yeah, that's what I would
That's
say.
my catch-all answer now.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's obviously all of those things in some respect, but I don't know what to. I don't know if it matters whether you classify it one way or another. But it's hard to
Well,
classify them
Republicans
as
are upset at businesses that are getting involved in politics. What do you call the NCAA? If you admit it's a business, you should pay the damn athletes. And if you don't, then what are you putting your nose in about what they do?
And even if they do admit that it's a business, they're just going to end up attacking the business. Yesterday's introduction of bills to withdraw antitrust status for Major League Baseball. I still really haven't educated myself as to why that's an issue, but okay. I don't know what this is, but NCAA,
You got to ask
I
Casey
guess.
Stengel on that one.
Yeah, same.
He'll explain it to you.
Okay, somebody ought to be able to explain it. I mean, there's probably a CRS report on it somewhere. But
right. If you've never seen the famous videotape of Casey Stengel explaining to Congress why baseball should retain its antitrust status, it's worth a 25-minute. Right. What did he just say? Then they turned to Mickey Mantle and said, "What do you think, Mr. Mantle?" And Mickey said, "I agree with Casey on that."
I would like to see it.
It's
can
wonderful.
Really imagine what 25 minutes worth of that would be like. But okay, I guess it's no worse than following a Donald Trump speech, but it can no longer affect your life. So
it's a lot more fun.
Okay, well that's good. But
anyway,
we
have that. Of course, we have all the stuff that's going on in
the
Minneapolis area. Very complicated situation there. And trial going on, more protests.
Yeah.
The idea that the defense wanted to sequester the jury from hearing about these separate protests over a separate killing of a black person by a cop.
Yeah.
And the judge saying, nah.
Good call. First of all, if you tried to impose it, it would be breached, and then you'd have your whole trial ruined, for one thing. But
well, that was I think the point of the defense.
Okay, and well, I mean, but they'll say that the trial's been ruined because the news got through. But I mean, what can I tell you?
We were trying to
ruin it. That's the
context.
Yeah,
everybody keeps telling us that. It's the Derrick Chauvin trial, not the George Floyd trial.
Yeah.
And Chauvin's on trial, and it sounds like he did some bad things.
Right. So they're hoping for a mistrial there. And who knows what happens in the end. But, I mean, that is the social context and the construct in which this is taking place. The fact that it happened again, I don't know that it's necessarily prejudicial to a jury. Of course it's happening again. The whole point of holding this trial, the whole point of there being protests, the whole point of people videotaping George Floyd's arrest was because they know that this is happening all the time, and it's not only not unusual, but that despite the fact that it's not unusual, people won't believe it unless we get it on film. I don't know if you can prejudice a jury anymore with an event like that.
And then don't miss this one. I hope it doesn't get buried within all the other slew of news that's happening. The Capitol Police were told, according to the New York Times, not to use their most aggressive tactics ahead of the January 6th riot, despite warnings of violence, which Congress itself is the target, according to a new report by an internal investigator. Stop the Steel's propensity to attract white supremacists, militia members, and others who actively promote violence may lead to a significantly dangerous situation for law enforcement and the general public alike. A Capitol Police threat assessment warned on January 3rd.
Yeah. And then
January 3rd. January 6th.
That's ahead of January 6th. Yes, okay.
Yeah. was the riot. January 3rd, they were told what was going to happen, and it seems like higher-ups ignored it, I guess because of the optics.
Maybe, or else they said, well, you know how it is with police brutality these days. We want to ratchet back. Ironically, the one police force that's instructing people, well, let's not use our most aggressive tactics, was the one that needed its most aggressive tactics that day. After being assured for many, many years that, well, police need to have these tricks in their bag because you never know when something's going to get out of hand. And none of these things ever seem to be about to get out of hand. You send them out of hand by responding aggressively. All right, well, then watch this. We won't. Well, bad optics that you chose the white one and the anti-government one to not get aggressive with. But, wow, complexities of governing, I guess. Well, it's going to have some negative effects, too. All right, that's very surprising, sort of.
All right, and then other news that, believe it or not, would be the big headline, except for all the other news. President of the United States, POTUS, will say in his speech today, I am now the fourth American president to preside over an American troop presence in Afghanistan, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I will not pass this responsibility to a fifth, so he's announcing troop pull-out by September 11th, 2021.
September 11th? Really?
Yeah. And everybody, the usual suspects are all upset about it. And, there's some pretty good arguments for not having an imperial police force there. And, hey, just takes us full circle to the days we were bloggers.
Yeah, true. Well, all you have to do is...
make Tora Bora great again.
And
Tora Bora for you kids, something to look up.
Yeah, you can do that in your spare time, I guess. It's pretty amazing. All you have to do, well, things come around. All you have to do is wait out 20 years of warfare and casualties to come around to being right about it. And everybody saying, but of course, part of it will be, well, we are withdrawing, but not because bloggers were right.
Right. Oh, and by the way, before I get off and I'm about to leave, it's that, Wednesday when the sanitation engineers come to inspect the house.
And they're coming.
So Abby loves it. And we try to get off a little early on Wednesday so that she doesn't spend your last 15 minutes parking. But this is from my friend, Craig Spencer, who is an MD, emergency room doc. You may remember him. He's the Ebola doctor.
Okay.
Who went down to Brooklyn on the L train and went bowling and then got Ebola. Remember him?
Yes, now I do. Should be a folk song about that.
The practical importance of this pause.
Not Abby's pause, but this pause. Are you pausing now?
He writes, very short thread. The many hot takes on here that the complications from J&J are so rare we shouldn't have paused its use are persuasive at face value. The pandemic is still raging. We need shots. The risk is low. All true. But the argument is missing something critical. Firstly, if my loved one was among the 6 with the complication and the FDA, CDC, U.S. government knew there was a signal but didn't act, I'd be furious.
Yes.
Okay. Will this mean it'll be harder to convince many? Yeah. But even if the risk is shown to be much lower? Yeah. But the practical importance of this pause was huge and really responsible. I was in the ER today, he says. One of the first patients I saw after getting briefed on the J&J decision was a young woman in her 30s. She got the J&J vaccine a week ago. Okay. She had symptoms that overlap with those we were told to look out for.
Right.
Today's announcement changed my differential diagnosis, that is to say a list of things that it might be, and impacted my clinical management. That's exactly what it was meant to do. It's also how we'll get the data we need. So stop pretending people don't know the difference between vaccines or the potential issues with one vaccine means they won't get the others. With today's announcement, will it impact vaccine hesitancy? Maybe a bit. But most importantly, it should drastically improve our faith in the public health institutions tasked with protecting us, and that's exactly why I think today's decision was the right one. So here's a doc who got the message because they blasted it, and within hours of getting the message was able to look at a patient and treat them differently, which was the point.
Yes, I guess so. And critical, as you said earlier in the show, because it's counterintuitive. The normal treatment would be something completely different, which actually will complicate things and make them worse. And you don't want that. Pretty obvious, I think.
Okay,
all right.
It's that time. So
yes.
Off we go, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, very good. Enjoy the day, Abby. And I don't know, if I have that tweet thread in my queue somewhere?
You're about to. No, I just
Okay. All right, Abby. No problem. We'll let you go. She's anxious to go. Thanks, Greg. And we'll check in with you tomorrow when it's not trash day. So, excellent. All right. Keeping an eye out for that. It's surprising that if we could just, I wish we had a translator. It would be fantastic to know what Abby is saying, except that it's usually like, hey, a truck, hey, hey. But, it's a valid observation. The data is true. It's not a complicated situation. The truck is either there or it's not. And I respect our abilities as a pundit to predict the future. Yeah, right. Okay, very good. Let's see, moving on to other topics for the day. I should bark the rest of the show. I think it's actually quite an attractive option, and makes it easier to deal with which story to go to next. Okay. What's happening now is my Twitter feed is being overtaken by a tweet I recently, it's my fault, sort of. I injected it into my own Twitter stream by retweeting it. Zachary Pedrizio, who's, a staff writer at Salon, I've just learned by clicking on his Twitter bio, who has the very astute observation. But it's visual, and you kind of have to see it. But I can sort of kind of describe it to you. It involves the apparent jerk-ass John Cardillo, who is a check-marked person of some sort, and now you'll find out exactly what sort. He's tweeting, and Zach has captured a photo, a screen grab of his tweet. He's tweeting, well, here's the media's Dante Wright, as opposed to the real Dante Wright. And guess why he's upset? He's upset because the media is tweeting pictures of him being a normal and loving person, posing with, is this his son or a member of his family? Maybe, I'm not up to speed on what pictures are being shared among respectable media of Dante Wright, but posing with a young baby, looks like maybe at their first birthday party. Could be his, could be a cousin. I don't know. I don't know how old Dante was, actually, now that I think about it. But side by side with a picture of, I guess, presumably a photo from Dante's social media presence or something. And, to no one's surprise, he's an American, after all, he's posing with a gun. But you know how that is, because white guys posing with guns, that's patriotism. Black guys posing with guns, that's thuggism. And that was John Cardillo's point, of course. They're showing you the wholesome American good guy posing with babies, whereas here he is posing with guns, which actually, by the way, is also true, I would imagine, of every Republican elected official in the country, as it happens. And that sort of jumps the point, because the next point that Zach makes is to grab a social media post from an earlier incarnation of John Cardillo, who is, he's actually being quite racist in the post, but the point is that it is a picture of him posing, mugging for the camera with a gun. Except when he does it, it's awesome white patriotism, and when any black people do it, or basically anyone other than him, it is, of course, thuggish. The original tweet of him posting, in which he's posing with the gun, is racist all by itself. It is I can't see the date in this photo here, but it's him pointing a gun at the camera with his patriotic, this is how you can tell it's patriotic, is he's got a hat with an American flag on it, and it is military style. And it says, I'm really enjoying these Eggs Benedict, so move along now. And the hashtag is Black Brunch NYC, which, without unraveling too much of the whole situation, it was basically him saying that he didn't want any Black Lives Matter protesters bothering him while he was having brunch, and he was going to emphasize that point by training a weapon on them, because that's his right, and you can tell that that's his right because, one, he's white, it appears to be white in the picture, is wearing a military-style cap, and there is an NRA cap in the background behind him when he is taking this picture on the shelves behind him, one of the early Zoom room ratings situations, I guess. And, that's the difference between people holding guns. White people holding guns, awesome and patriotic and in defense of their rights. Black people holding guns, they are making rap videos and mugging for the camera about what thugs they are. And it seems like a lot of people believe that he's got an interesting point. And I'm one of them, and now 109 other people think so too. And I imagine many more throughout the day. But it's true. You don't have to look any further than Republican members of Congress, or hey, even look among the 10 Republican senators who are holding themselves out as reasonable people to be trusted and bargained with over this infrastructure bill, and tell me that you don't think that somewhere in their past you will be able to find pictures of them holding babies and posing with babies for photos, and pictures of them holding guns and posing for photos. But somehow, something, you know where this goes. It lands on racism. But we'll spin the wheel of fortune, and as it turns out, 63 of the 64 spaces on the wheel will land on racism. Then there's the 00 green, and as unusual as it is and rare as it is, the House wins on that one too. So it's a bit of a rigged game. Okay, just want to borrow everybody's metaphors for this. All right, let's see. What other things can we sneak in between now and what might be my mistaken impression of when the next break begins? Let's see. Not too much, because the bell just went off, but that means 30 seconds till we start the music, and a minute until we get the hell out of here. What can we say? There's more discussion in the news about Matt Gaetz, but I don't think it's any dramatic breakthroughs of any kind. I'll borrow TPM's reporting on the subject. Gaetz' buddy Greenberg, you'll never believe it, he's assisting the feds in investigating Matt Gaetz, which is kind of what everybody was speculating right from the beginning, although some people said, well, we don't know yet. But now I guess we know. Christina Cabrera seems to know, and she says Joel Greenberg, Matt Gaetz' associate who has been slapped with dozens of criminal charges, is reportedly assisting the Justice Department investigation in their inquiry into whether the Republican lawmaker made cash payments for sex and had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old. Good morning. Hope you're having your breakfast. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. I'm just now rounding up more interesting comments on the John Cardillo conundrum, trying to figure out exactly what passes as patriotism. And Darwin Darko here chiming in here, our friend saying, that Lauren Boebert lady had like 100 guns in her Zoom call. Was that the real Boebert? And what does that even mean? It's a good question. Because there are side-by-side comparisons to be had between when the real Boebert, I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question what it really means. So which one was the real Lauren Boebert? The one with 100 guns in her Zoom background, or the one who, in the wake of a mass shooting, quickly scrambled to remove those guns from the background of her Zoom room? I'm not really sure which one it would be. And if I were not doing the show, I'd go back and round up those pictures and put them side by side. Maybe a little project if no one's already jumped at it. But maybe, Darwin, maybe you want to do it while the show's going on. That'd be an interesting thing to put alongside Zach Patrizio's compilation of the photos of John Cardillo. But, kind of crazy. Okay. Do we learn anything more from TPM's coverage of all this? Oh my God. We do. And it comes from an unexpected corner. So I don't know. How long is the article? So, okay. I think I could do this effectively. I should have just read it, because then I would have just been laughing out loud when I got it. Now I will no longer surprise myself. Are you ready for what made me say, oh my God? All right, the mundane. Joel Greenberg, Matt Gaetz' associate, right, slapped with dozens of criminal charges. We just read that. Helping the feds investigate whether Matt Gaetz is a criminal kind of pervert. The New York Times reports that Greenberg, who formerly served as a Seminole County tax collector in Florida, yada, 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 told investigators about encounters that he and Gates had with women who he was sex trafficking, yada, yada. I mean, you have to yada, yada sex trafficking when you're talking about Matt Gaetz and other Republicans at this point. A previous Times report revealed that those encounters were part of the Justice Department's investigation into Gates, which stemmed from the probe into Greenberg. Some of the charges against Greenberg include sex trafficking involving a minor and using data available to him as tax collector in his pursuit of sugar daddy relationships. Investigators are trying to determine whether the minor was the same 17-year-old Gates is alleged to have had sex with. According to the New Times report, Greenberg met with the investigators several times in a bid for leniency, in a sweeping criminal case after realizing how much evidence prosecutors had on him at that point. So it's pretty much what we thought about. I can give you a congressman if you'll let me off the hook for some of this. And I hope that there's room in all of this, the way the deals have been structured, to say, yeah, sure, give us the congressman, and then get the congressman and then say, psych, you're going to jail. But I don't know. Now, the part that made me say, oh my God. Harlan Hill, a spokesperson for Gates, told the Times that, what? Harlan Hill, isn't he that like baby-faced, round, moon-faced, fake Democrat who says, oh, I've been a Democrat all my life, but now I'm pro-Trump as a pundit, the bow tie, the latest bow tie kid. Isn't that him? Harlan Hill? Nobody, they don't there's no, there needs to be like a punctuation mark whereby writers can subtly spit out their coffee in the middle of the thing, but not exceed their word count or whatever, or sneak it by their editor. Harlan Hill, yes, the spokesperson for Gates, told the Times that Greenberg was, quote, trying to ensnare innocent people in his troubles, and repeated the congressman's claim of never paying for sex, which is not the dodge he thinks it is. Gates has not been criminally charged. We all know that. Yada, yada. Multiple outlets reported last week that Greenberg was expected to plead guilty. He so far has pleaded not guilty to all charges. So I guess you pundits are wrong on that one. Fritz Scheller, Greenberg's attorney, the one who looks vaguely like Trump's old doctor who died, at least, the long hair and everything. I think that's the guy. Fritz Scheller, Greenberg's attorney, told reporters after his client's hearing on Thursday, I am sure Matt Gaetz is not feeling very comfortable today. So what? The lawyer also said Greenberg was uniquely situated, which is, I think, supposed to be his code for, yes, we're cooperating. We're uniquely situated to be able to implicate Matt Gaetz. Harlan Hill is a frickin' wacko idiot, for one thing. Two, the fact that he's involved in this is amazing. Three, the fact that anybody ever believed that he was like, oh, I'm really a Democrat, but I'm convinced by Trump, and that's why they're putting me on the news, is amazing. The fact that he's still alive somehow is still amazing. It's still working. One, his dodge is stupid. Gates' dodge is very calculated. He never paid for sex. I know it's because the website that he uses for his trafficking is structured basically, I think, by jailhouse lawyers who think things like, if Twitter bans me, that's a First Amendment violation. And if you come near my property, I'm allowed to shoot you from 1,000 yards away because stand your ground. This sort of legal interpretation. Now believes, well, if you pay for other commodities, which people are willing to trade for sex, then it's not prostitution. Or at least I can claim I never paid for sex. I mean, the follow-up question is, have you ever bartered for sex, I guess? To which the follow-up answer could be, haven't we all? I mean, I guess that's a fair response. But in this context, have you ever bartered for sex as a 38-year-old congressman with a 17-year-old girl? That's a problem. So, I mean, this is what he's resting it. He's hanging his hat, as it were, on the idea that if I paid for what's a good item if I paid for a top-of-the-line iPad, and that iPad was given to someone who later, for no other good reason, had sex with me. Have I paid for sex? Well, no, I paid for an iPad. I got sex because she really likes iPads. Or me. That's what I meant. She really likes me. For me. She gets me, so to speak. I gets her iPads. She gets me personally. So that's the trade. And the legal-ish thinking, and it may work, I don't know, in the end, but not necessarily because the legal thinking was good, because it's a fairly simple workaround. Now that I guess now we're supposed to pretend, I've just discovered that people do this, and we can try and make this illegal too. But for some strange reason, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, this transaction might not have been criminalized up to this point, such that Matt Gaetz gets away with this. Although I did see somebody commenting the other day that, what was it? That I've lost my train of thought because I saw Harlan Hill's name again, and I just completely lost it. But oh, yes, right. That Gaetz might still be on the hook because even if they can't convict him of sex trafficking, one of the federal statutes under which he might be charged attaches a criminal liability for engaging in an effort to obstruct an investigation into such trafficking, and he might be on the hook for that. So that's pretty interesting as a possibility. Meanwhile, I want to wave a red flag out there on Twitter about Harlan Hill being buried in this story, and I haven't seen anybody discussing it. Maybe I don't know if it's worth it, but maybe the thing to do is to search recent tweets for mention of Harlan Hill and just latch onto that if someone has already done this work. But I can't believe Harlan Hill doesn't get called out in this piece, and I think the TPM people will all be disappointed that they didn't catch that the first time around, or didn't make a big enough deal of catching it if they did. All right, so we got the drop on them. Boy, oh boy, in about an hour, we're really going to let them have it. I mean, I'm not mad about it, but you get the idea. We feel like we've discovered something. That's the fun of reading the news together. All right, let's see. Other items that I've put aside for discussion and inspection. Oh, this one's not for discussion. What's this doing here? You stop that, you. All right. Back over to Pocket, and we can skip down. Oh, yes, right. Greg had mentioned the New York Times' report that somehow Capitol Police were told to hold back on their riot response. I do kind of want to take a look at that one, but maybe not necessarily with airtime today. See if we can digest it, and if there's anything worth pulling out of there later in the week. Here's I guess the same jailhouse lawyers are at work. We'll see whether this scheme works. The Hill reporting that Trump lawyers are arguing that the New York tax return law, the one that they're, it'll explain. The New York tax return law no longer applies to him, is the theory. Naomi Jagoda is the author of the piece for The Hill. Let's see what's going on here. Former President Trump, he is former, we know that, his personal lawyers on Monday urged a federal judge to find that a New York state law on which congressional tax return requests... Wait a minute. The sentence doesn't make sense. But okay, what's happening here is he's talking about, remember when New York State passed a law that said the federal government can request from us under certain circumstances, which are exactly mirrored by then President Trump's then current circumstances. Under those circumstances, the New York State tax returns would be made available upon request to the federal government. This was an outgrowth of the hesitancy that congressional Democrats, and was it Richard Neal that was in charge? Do I have the name right? Or am I thinking of somebody considerably from a different area. Yeah, Richard Neal, that's right, was in charge of the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and it was his prerogative under then existing federal law to examine Trump's federal tax returns, pretty much for any reason. But as a sitting president or really anybody could have their reviews or their returns reviewed by the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And he was hesitant for various reasons, some not so good necessarily, and wasn't doing it anyway. But he had some legal worries, not all entirely justified, about doing this. New York jumped out and said, well, you can tell a lot of the same information by his state tax returns, so we'll just let you know casually that under a newly adopted New York state law, it is permissible for us to release a New York state taxpayer's returns to the federal government for whatever reason for their inspection. Okay, so now Trump's lawyers are in court arguing that this state law no longer applies to him because he's no longer in office. Apparently, their read, anyway, of the way this bill or this law was written throws it into question. But we're not real sure about that. While the Trust Act, that was the name of it, it's an acronym, TRUST, Trust, I don't know what it stands for. Something funky, I'm sure. Though the Trust Act is not the clearest statute, the best reading is that it does not apply to former presidents. Another one of those problems, eh? This is what Trump's lawyers wrote in a court filing. New York in 2019 enacted a law called the Trust Act. We've gathered that, thank you, that allows the chairs of Congress's tax committees to request public officials' state tax returns. Trump then filed a lawsuit in an effort to prevent the House Ways and Means Committee from obtaining his state tax returns. And I guess that suit has dragged on long enough that he is no longer in office, and now his excuse is, well, now you can't have them because I'm not a public official anymore. Judge Carl Nichols, a federal district court judge in Washington, D.C., appointed by Trump, has ordered the Ways and Means Committee to give the court and Trump's lawyers contemporaneous notice if it requests Trump's state tax returns. And I guess that means that they haven't, and so the whole case should be thrown out as speculative anyway. But okay, it hasn't been. He also ordered the committee to not receive any requested state tax returns until 14 days after it makes a request. That is another terrible sentence, I think, but does this mean that you order the committee to not receive it? Like, I get what you mean, but that's a weird way of putting it. So basically, you need 14 days notice between the request and the delivery. It really should be an order to the state tax authorities not to deliver it until 14 days after the request is made. But okay. Maybe it's just that the federal judge feels like they don't have jurisdiction over the state tax authorities, but they do have jurisdiction over the way the House Ways and Means Committee works. Trump's lawyers argued that if Nichols doesn't determine, who am I looking at? No, Nichols, the judge, right. Trump's lawyers argued that if Judge Nichols does not determine that the Trust Act no longer applies to Trump, then Nichols should keep this order in place. This is getting confusing. Trump's lawyers said that the Ways and Means Committee won't agree to the proposition that the New York law doesn't pertain to Trump anymore. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal, that's solved, has not requested Trump's state tax returns and has been more focused on obtaining his federal tax returns from the Treasury Department and the IRS. Neal's effort to obtain Trump's federal tax returns is the subject of a separate lawsuit. The committee's lawyers said in Monday's court filing that they think Nichols' order doesn't properly respect the Constitution's separation of powers principle. They also noted that Trump didn't pursue any claims challenging the Trust Act in a New York court once Nichols dismissed New York officials from the lawsuit for lack of jurisdiction. That non-action by him should now serve as a clear signal to this court that he did not and does not have any claim worth pursuing about the New York State statute, the committee's lawyers wrote. This court, which they're capitalizing and is improper unless you're addressing the Supreme Court, I believe. This court should therefore now immediately dismiss this case, leaving plaintiff Trump with whatever remedies he might wish to pursue in an appropriate court against an appropriate defendant. And I think I understand and agree with that conclusion. That's kind of bizarre. I think the writing was a little less than clear, but it might be that it's difficult to describe simply and straightforwardly because of the weird jurisdictional issues involved and all that. That's odd. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Speaking of not expecting things, how would you like to delve into a story I didn't expect? Well, it's not political per se on its face, but I think we can see a political angle to it. But I'm thinking first maybe the way to go is to back up from this one to something else that happened this morning, something else that was being tweeted around besides reaction to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine situation, and related to the first thing I mentioned this morning, the Slate article about trusting people and returning to work, etc., and viewing that through a political lens and saying, well, it's one thing to say I don't trust people the same way and I don't think I ever will again because they could be, disease carrying and full of germs and maybe not being all that careful about things. And an interesting observation from my wife earlier today, again, dealing with the issues of returning to the office and people saying, well, we have greater access into the lives of our colleagues now than ever before, thanks to, horrible innovations like the Facebook platform, which trick us into announcing to everyone and documenting it with photographic evidence that I've been engaged in various risk-related behaviors. And, going back to work when, in the face of posts from colleagues who have been out at bars or down in, bar hopping at the beach all weekend and put it on Facebook because that used to be a normal thing to do, but now is a risky behavior for everybody else, including the people who went bar hopping. It's a little weird, and it's hard to trust people, even people you're friends with. You weren't taking the pandemic seriously enough for me to trust working with you today. You weren't working hard on it yesterday, and now I don't want to see you in the office today. But in addition, it'll be difficult for people to trust their employers, especially if those employers say, we're active participants in politics as Republicans for various reasons, and not just because they're now also possibly anti-democratic insurrectionists, but even if they don't go that far, were you lobbying, say, for immunity from criminal or civil liability if if you force everybody to come back to work and somebody comes back to work and gets sick here? Like, how do we expect? It's interesting that there were once touting this immunity as the way to get everybody back to work and get things back to normal. Whereas I have to believe that there are plenty of workers out there who say, no, the idea of offering immunity from that is the least likely thing to get me back to work. If I know that my employer doesn't have a care in the world about how thoroughly they've prepared and made the office safe for us, then I'm absolutely not going to trust that they've done anything. I think putting the fear of God into them by exposing them to liability is what's more likely to make them careful about how they ask us to return to work. It's just it's a weird behavioral economics problem. But a different one brought up also this morning as I watched Oliver Willis tweeting about the corporate alliance that we discussed now forming to push back on Republican voter suppression efforts. And he was just noting that record, or the article on it in the New York Times. Hundreds of companies unite to oppose voting limits, but others abstain. and retweeting that and noting, Jim Crow isn't good for business, was Oliver's take on it. But just to go back to the thought we had the other day on it, suppressing the universe of marketplace participants is not a thing. Like, that's not an option available to corporate America. That's why their interests are diverging from Republican politicians. Republicans still operating in that weird artificial construct where, because you get to set the rules, make the laws, right? They're basically saying, well, we'll just write these people out of the electorate, and then the whiter electorate that appreciates it anyway will vote for us and will, as it were, get a larger share of a shrinking pie. But it doesn't matter, because we'll write a law that says everybody who's been shrunk out of this pie doesn't matter. But corporations can't do that. They don't have the option of simply redefining the universe of the marketplace. They either are market leaders and are earning enough money to be profitable and stay in business, or they're not. And to them, well, demographics tell us this: there are non-white people who have money to spend, and they're allowed to spend it. They're allowed to participate in the marketplace. That kind of struck me like, well, that wasn't always true. That currently suppressing the universe of participants isn't something that works for corporations the way it does for Republicans. But that wasn't always the case. It's just that that's the case now, since the time when, the mysterious they, whoever they are, since they consented to agree to allow minorities, we had a war over it, but, to participate in the economy. They were at one point able to say, those aren't citizens. They're not even people, much less participants in the economy. They are commodities that we trade with one another. And just that's like how back in the day, even marketplace participants, corporations, could still engage in that kind of white supremacy and profit by it. There wasn't any profit lost by participating in the exclusion of black people, because they didn't have the right to participate in the economy. So it's just, that's the economic version. Slavery was the economic version of this voter suppression that politicians are still able to reserve to themselves as a trick in their bag. But it's just in what I guess passes for the real world, the economy, to those of us living in in any system, but certainly in the capitalist system. But how ironic it is that, of course, Republicans love to cleave to that position that the original Republicans, well, they were the abolitionists. You should be thanking us still 150 years later. But, of course, the big problem is that they've turned into the chief racist party. Certainly there's plenty of blame to go around, and you can hang the label on a lot of people, and maybe even some current Democrats now. But okay, well, one party seems less than ashamed to run as a kind of sort of almost openly racist, openly white supremacist party. They keep denying that they want to do that or want to be that, but increasingly participants are shying away from denying it, or finding less reason to deny it, and they're taking little baby steps towards it, like, maybe democracy isn't great, or maybe the quality of voters is terrible and we need to restrict the franchise. I mean, it's weird that you would do this, but okay, they are taking those baby steps towards it. But that's all it is. I mean, to my way of thinking, is that at one point in time, the people who, latched onto abolitionism as a political platform, weirdly, 150 years later, things change, right? We always point out, well, it's true that the Republicans love to point out that the original racists and those who opposed abolition and who fought the prosecuted the Civil War from the Southern perspective, they were all Democrats. And so therefore, today's modern Democrats are the true racists, and we always point out, things evolve over 150 years, things change. They do, and they've changed for Republicans as well, and that's how we've ended up here. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of I don't know. I was a little bit shaken to realize, we all knew that, the slavery system was obviously deeply racist and horrific and abhorrent, and at least finally in hindsight to the bulk of Americans, white Americans. But that it was just outright a method of excluding minorities, at least black people anyway, and I guess that was the most frequently encountered minority in the United States at that time, just excluding them from the economy entirely. And then I caught myself and said, well, it's not they weren't part of the economy, it's just that they weren't participants, they were tradable commodities. How awful. What a thought. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, well, let's see. Look at that. I don't know whether this is related to the tweet from Zachary Petrizio that we were talking about earlier, but I see now. I'll put this one aside, maybe for side-by-side comparison. But somebody making the very point that Darwin Darko was making earlier. Who's tweeting this? Shelley Gross from where? Is tweeting under the handle of, let's see, Cinderella-ishus? Okay, I guess so. Tweeting side-by-side photos of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert holding their favorite AR-15s, those very modular weapons that we discussed yesterday, and asking, would their Republican colleagues still be cool with this if they were black? Most people concluding no, that they would not be. But it would certainly, I'm sure in their minds, pose an entirely different question, simply based on the color of their skin. How surprising. Okay, let's see. Other things that I was interested in exploring. I was wondering, should we take a look at that Slate piece about that, returning to work? Was there anything to be mined from that? I think they're still talking about something entirely different in terms of returning to work than, say, hearkening back to the liability issues and finding out that your colleagues might in fact be, sympathetic with insurrectionists, if not insurrectionists themselves. But to me, that becomes a trust issue, although I don't work around people who have that problem, but the rest of you may. I don't know, I found that kind of interesting. Also in the news, and I just commented on Twitter during the break, a story from The Hill reporting that, let me grab it on this computer instead, reporting that Oath Keepers, apparently, who were at the participating in the insurrection, there's new evidence, video evidence, that prosecutors are bringing forth that the Oath Keepers folks, they're just folks, were stashing weapons at the hotel that they were staying at nearby to the Capitol in case the violence escalated. They were going to run back and get their guns and make it a shooting insurrection. And that's sort of interesting, just, as evidence against them and all this. But I was taking note of the fact that, As I recall, some hotels in the area had the presence of mind somehow, though this presence of mind apparently escaped the Capitol Police, to decide not to honor the reservations of certain of the more notorious insurrectionist groups, i.e. the Proud Boys. They had their reservations canceled by the hotel that they decided to stay at. And I don't know if I would necessarily reach the conclusion that hotels like this one, where they allowed the Oath Keepers to stay and stash their weapons, could be held liable for that. They may have had no idea that they were doing that, although it looks like the video that they're providing makes it fairly obvious that that's, what's actually being carried back and forth. I mean, they're using the luggage cart to carry these gun cases back and forth, and I don't think it necessarily required any special training to spot them as rifle cases. You don't have to have necessarily a trained eye to figure that out, but certainly people have the right to, although if they were in D.C., I don't know how much right they had necessarily to move those. I don't know what the gun laws are in D.C. anymore, and it doesn't even matter because the court will overturn all of them anyhow. But I'm just saying that some hotels had the presence of mind to figure out not to honor reservations from insurrectionists, and maybe because the Proud Boys have that reputation, they were able to figure this out. But the Oath Keepers, by this point, really should not be excluded from among those more notorious groups. And it may be that I think the hotel that actually did cancel the Proud Boys reservations had some experience with hosting Proud Boys gatherings in the past, and so they knew who they were dealing with. And it's not necessarily the case that this hotel clearly had dealt with Oath Keepers prior to this. So it might not have been as easy to spot for them. But I'm just saying, some hotels, knew what to do with these folks, and others didn't. And that's an interesting question if you're going to delve into the liability questions. Okay, so how about this? I told you that we would explore a very different line of inquiry here. Just a story that grabbed me as interesting, and I think that the writer probably took some view of this as political, geopolitical, I suppose, because it is international in scope. But it's looked at through a very different lens here on this show because of the players involved and what they have been up to in the past. How about this? From Forbes magazine, Suzanne Rowan Kelleher writes this interesting piece. I guess she's usually a travel writer, because it looks like that's what it says here, is like she's a travel columnist. How about this story? Saudi Crown Prince MBS, right? Mr. Bonesaw, as Greg likes to call him, pressed the Louvre, the museum in Paris, and elsewhere, which is something we'll get to. I had no idea was the case. Pressed the Louvre to lie about his fake Leonardo da Vinci painting per new documentary. That's weird and intriguing. A new feature-length documentary set to debut next week, and I guess that's, is that now this week? Set to debut next week on French TV, alleges that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman pressured the Louvre. How's my pronunciation? Do they say Louvre? I'm not certain how they would actually say it, but pressures the museum to lie about the authenticity of a painting he had purchased in order to spare him the public humiliation of having spent $450 million on a fake. Well, it turns out to be a little bit more nuanced than that, as is explained in the piece. But what a situation. And you might wonder, what would be the interest of the Louvre in doing such a thing? Why do they care? And it becomes plain in all of this. But rather than speculate, let me give you the basis of the things from the article. And then we'll speculate recklessly after that. The Savior for Sale is the name of the documentary by French filmmaker Antoine Vitkine, Vitkine, if it's important to you to look it up that way. The Savior for Sale, that much we can spell. It delves into the murky controversy surrounding the Salvator Mundi, or Savior of the World, a portrait of, well, guess who is widely viewed by many millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world as the Savior of the world. It's your friend Jesus Christ, everybody. And the painting apparently has been dubbed the male Mona Lisa. I think maybe that's, selling Jesus Christ short a little bit. Like, I don't know, maybe she should be the female Jesus, but maybe that's elevating her. I don't know. But the idea of, it's a painting of Jesus, and, well, who can we compare that to? Well, there's other painting over here, but okay. It's because it's Leonardo da Vinci, I think, more than anything else. Just weird. The painting, though, made art world history in 2017 when nearly 1,000 art collectors, dealers, and onlookers packed into a room at Rockefeller Center. Oh my God, COVID, but it's 2017. Packed into a room at Rockefeller Center in New York as the venerable Christie's auction house sold the painting for a record $450 million, making it the world's most expensive painting. Congratulations, you made it. The vast public interest, 120,000 art fans watched the auction via a Facebook live stream, and that wasn't even because of pandemic, right? And the extravagant winning bid reflected the extreme rarity of authenticated works by Leonardo da Vinci. Despite the Italian master's enormous fame and influence, there are fewer than 20 paintings in existence judged to be from his own hand, and all of them part of museum collections already. Christie's called the painting the greatest artistic rediscovery in the last 100 years. I guess this refers to the idea that whether it's valid or not, growing acceptance of the idea that perhaps more of the painting, if not all of the painting, was in fact done by Leonardo himself as opposed to his assistants in his studio, which was the case with more of the paintings associated with Da Vinci. But it's not a conclusion everyone agrees with. And I guess what's really increasing now is the conclusion that that isn't the case. Anyway, questions over the Salvator Mundi's authenticity began to percolate when the Louvre Abu Dhabi Museum, yes, unexpectedly canceled the painting's planned unveiling in September of 2018. The painting has not been seen in public since. That sort of brings us to our next, the speculative phase of the story. We'll get to it in a minute, but pause for just a second. The Louvre Abu Dhabi. And when I say Louvre, you say Paris. Okay. You get the idea here. Did you not think that the Louvre was not only the museum in Paris, but that was the only one they had? Because that's always been my impression. But apparently I'm wrong. I looked it up, and it turns out there is, in fact, a museum in Abu Dhabi, and it's called the Louvre. And you might think, well, that sounds like a copyright infringement. Well, of course, it's done by agreement. But did you know that there even was such a thing? So Wikipedia tells us this about it. The Louvre Abu Dhabi is currently, now, it's like they're done with it already, an art and civilization museum located in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. The museum is located on the Saadiyat Island Cultural District, one of the artificial islands that they construct there. And, this island will be all about culture. Damn it, we're having some culture. Build me an island and put it on it. That's what having gobs and gobs of money, and that's where I'm really going with all of this story, can do for you. We're going to build an island and we need some culture around here, damn it. Build it. And so they do. And so, okay, right, it's large, gives us the size. This is Wikipedia, after all, telling us how much gallery space it is, making it the largest art museum on the Arabian Peninsula, or right off of the Arabian Peninsula because it's an artificial island. Artworks from around the world are showcased at the museum, with particular focus being placed upon bridging the gap between Eastern and Western art. An admirable mission. Good idea. But again, how is it the Louvre? Well, I read the history section here. The establishment of the museum was approved by the French Parliament on October 9th, 2007. Then, somewhat less interesting, the architect for the building. I don't know, some of you will be interested in that, but I'm not. Engineers, the design of the place. The museum was inaugurated on November 8th, 2017 by French President Emmanuel Macron. Also present, of course, UAE Vice President Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum and Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. I'm going to try and pronounce that the way it looks to be the case. But MBZ, you remember the MBZ and MBS. MBS, the Saudi, MBZ, the Emirati. Abu Dhabi paid $525 million to be associated with the Louvre name. And an additional $747 million will be paid in exchange for art loans, sounds like purchase, but rental, I guess, special exhibitions, and management advice. So the whole deal is the museum is part of a $27 billion tourist and cultural development for Saadiyat Island, a complex which is planned to include 3 other museums, and we'll get to those in a second. At least some of them are of interest. So but basically what they did here is they said, look, we want to have some goddamn culture. Build me an island and put some freaking culture on it. All right, I'm being perhaps more crude about it than they are. They're very refined. They're very rich and worldly gentlemen, and so they probably handled this very differently. But at bottom, we want to have some culture. And who doesn't? It's a great idea to have some culture, right? Especially if you're not known for that, but you're becoming a bit of a rich person's playground. What are rich people like? They love freaking culture and art. Get some goddamn art and culture here so we can, attract these people. So anyway, they did it. In addition to which, I'm sure MBZ, MBS, all of them are like, we have more money than God. Even if God is in this painting, we have more money than this guy. That's how I can prove it. I bought God. That's how I know we have more money than God. And I want to put it on display. But what's also important to me, perhaps, is I want to be seen as having the world's most sophisticated art collection. Because that's one of those things that rich people like Western rich people. They're into the culture crap. So I want to have the best art collection. And what better way to measure how awesome and cultured my collection is than for it to be the world's most expensive? There's a little bit of Trumpism, involved in all of this. How can I guarantee that it is the world's most expensive art collection? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. And one is to overpay and pay whatever. Who cares if I overpay? I have, again, more money than God. Yes, I will pay $450 million for this thing. That now defines it as the world's most freaking cultured picture ever. And I own it. I'm the most cultured person ever for owning this picture. But of course, it's an investment. That's important to these people too. I need more money, particularly since I just wasted $450 million on this, which I said is from Leonardo da Vinci and it might not be. Back to that part of the story in a second. But in the meantime, how do I guarantee that the most expensive painting ever continues to appreciate in value? I mean, it is by definition sort of the outer limit of the art world's appreciation, in dollar terms of this thing. Like, it's the most expensive thing there is. How much room is there to expand? It can, of course, be someone else might offer to buy it for $800 million. But how do I encourage them to do that? One of the ways you encourage somebody to pay more than you paid for this thing, which was, as it turns out, not really a great idea, is to say, well, my painting is so freaking awesome that it is displayed in the Louvre, which is, everyone knows, where the best stuff is. Why, the Mona Lisa is there, and I have the male Mona Lisa. And you, if you want to buy it, you're going to have to pay extra because it's so freaking famous it's in the Louvre. Well, we can't get it in the Louvre, or if we put it in there, then it'll be in France, and you live in Abu Dhabi and you won't be able to admire the thing very much or whatever. Or the people in the Louvre are like, well, we don't really want to necessarily display it here. But later on, it turns out they do. That becomes important too. But not permanently, like the Mona Lisa. And it won't be the world's most expensive painting for long if I don't get that status. Well, here's what I need you to do then. Buy the Louvre and bring it here. And then I'll have my painting in the Louvre, and it'll also be here, and I'll get the most expensive, it'll now be the most famous painting and the most expensive as well. Well, gee whiz, I mean, you can't just buy the Louvre and move it here. Oh yeah? Watch me. I have more money than God. I will buy the Louvre. And essentially, then he did. $425 million paid to France to say, we agree, they control these things at the French government level, we agree to let you call your crazy-ass Abu Dhabi museum a Louvre in exchange for naming rights, essentially. So, instead of Costco Stadium, I will build the Louvre Abu Dhabi, and put art in it, or whatever. It's just a different kind of naming rights. And in case you think that the French are uniquely corrupt in this or whatever, I will now go back to the Wikipedia entry to tell you that one of the other new museums planned for this artificial island is the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. So yes, we're susceptible to it as well. All right, now back to this weird article in Forbes. So questions over the Salvator Mundi's authenticity began to percolate when the Louvre Abu Dhabi canceled its planned unveiling for September of 2018, and the painting has not been seen in public since. The whereabouts of the work remained a mystery until, in 2019, the art industry news service ArtNet reported that the 500-year-old painting was being kept on Mohammed bin Salman's 440-foot super yacht, Serene. That's the name of the super yacht. And wow, and I see that would be an exciting bit of news. One, it's a little bit like, this is as pretentious as it gets. Put it on my yacht, my super yacht. Not the crap yacht, the super yacht over here. The crap one is only 430 feet. 440 feet over here is the one I want it on. And he puts it there, and it's the sort of thing I think it's maybe meant to evoke, like 500-year-old painting, maybe possibly Leonardo da Vinci had a hand in it, maybe even painted it himself. Could you not put it on a boat? That just seems like less than secure. But what do I care? I'm so rich, I could pay $450 million for this thing, even if it's fake, as it turns out, and put it on a boat. Or maybe he put it on the boat like he found out, oh man, it might not even be authentic. Now I don't even give a crap about it. Put it on the boat. I don't know what motivated it. Seems showy, though. Then came an enlightening bombshell. A scientific analysis by 3 experts at the Louvre in Paris, the fake Louvre, concluded that the painting was produced in Leonardo's workshop, but not by the Renaissance master himself. The Louvre historians had intended to publish their findings, but were prevented from doing so when the painting's owner, who now turns out to be the guy who will saw you into a million pieces if he doesn't like you, when the painting's owner declined to loan it for the blockbuster Leonardo exhibition in 2019 at the Paris Louvre. So they did kind of want to display the thing. So when the question was posed, what would make the Louvre folks, whatever the hell you would call them, interested at any level in authenticating Salvator Mundi as a genuine Da Vinci if it wasn't? And the answer is, well, you want it for your big Da Vinci exhibition, even though you aren't willing to say it's a Da Vinci painting per se. It's still part of the Da Vinci retrospective. What was Leonardo da Vinci up to 500 years ago? Well, one thing was making his students paint this thing, and then he put a few brush strokes on it. But it's still important for our exhibition. Well, guess what? You can't have it unless you do me this favor. I will love to lend you this painting. Do us a little favor, though. Find the votes among the experts in the Louvre to, wink, wink, find me the votes to get the panel of experts willing to say, this actually is a Da Vinci after all. Well, interesting. The museum, it notes parenthetically here in the Forbes piece, is restricted from publicly commenting on privately owned paintings that it has not exhibited. Just a little internal rule that they have there at the Louvre, Paris. I don't know whether they have the same rule at the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. And whether, the interesting question for the future, is a panel of experts assembled by the Louvre, Abu Dhabi, willing to say something different about the provenance of this painting? And can they do it as the Louvre if the French Louvre people say they can't? A string of art historians, it is reported, has also weighed in. In his book, The Last Leonardo, art critic Ben Lewis also concluded that the painting more than likely came out of Leonardo's studio and then was touched up by the master. The Guardian quoted Dr. Carmen Baumbach, an art historian and curator of Italian and Spanish works at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, saying that Christie's had wrongly included her among scholars who had attributed the painting to Leonardo da Vinci. In her view, the Salvator Mundi was primarily the work of an assistant, Giovanni Antonio Boltraffio, with only small retouchings by Leonardo himself. And Matthew Landris, an Oxford art historian, speculated publicly that the painting was produced largely by another of Leonardo's assistants, Bernardino Luini. Wittgen's documentary traces the history of the painting, and get this, beginning with its purchase in poor condition for $1,175 by a New York art dealer in 2005. Wow, now it's $450 million. Now this is interesting too. The painting was restored in the United States, authenticated as a genuine Leonardo by several art experts at the British National Gallery, and that's interesting all by itself. Like, see, lobby people to authenticate. Imagine you bought something for $1,100. You would obviously be interested in getting it authenticated as a genuine Leonardo, because then it would be worth lots. How much? $127.5 million, apparently, 2 years later. Now, here's another twist in the situation. If you don't believe that Mohammed bin Salman would saw you into 35 pieces for failing to verify his newly acquired painting as a genuine Leonardo, the painting was sold for $127.5 million to a Russian oligarch who would probably saw you into 35 pieces for looking at him funny, much less telling him, getting the British National Gallery in on the act to say, yeah, it's a genuine Leonardo. He bought it for $1,000. You could have it for $100 million, $127.5 million. So I guess at some point, maybe there was interest on the part of the Russian oligarch sawing this other guy, the New York art dealer, into 35 pieces. Unless he doesn't care anymore because he's been able to sell it. I don't know whether he was the only intervening owner, but now the painting's been sold for $450 million. If it was bought from the Russian oligarch, he's made his money back. He's happy that this New York art dealer went through all this trouble to authenticate this thing as a Leonardo, and that he was able to unload it on somebody else without getting stuck for the bill, so to speak, with the only possible exception being that one of the few people that could possibly saw a Russian oligarch into 35 pieces is the guy who bought the painting. But I don't know. The film also reveals what was going on behind the scenes at the Louvre after the Christie's auction. The film reportedly features several senior officials from President Macron's government appearing under pseudonyms, because they don't want to get sawed into pieces, who allege that the Crown Prince's offer to lend the painting to the Louvre for the 2019 exhibition had strings attached. The Prince's conditions were that the Louvre must establish the Salvator Mundi alongside the Mona Lisa and present it as a 100% Leonardo da Vinci. Ultimately, President Macron rejected Saudi demands, and the French Museum never exhibited the painting. The incident has reportedly actually caused a minor diplomatic rift between France and Saudi Arabia. So some geopolitical impact over all of this. Very interesting. And I guess the question is, where did this idea that it should be authenticated and that you might want to use some sort of coercive force, if not actually necessarily physical force, come from to get these things authenticated. And it would make a hell of a movie plot, although then somebody pointed out, like, I'm not sure about it either because I didn't read the book or see the movie, but somebody said, well, isn't that sort of kind of the plot of the Da Vinci Code in some way? And I don't know, maybe it is. You tell me, but what a movie that would be. So does Mohammed bin Salman have to threaten to saw you into pieces? Does the Russian oligarch's threat do it? Which one is more credible? And does Emmanuel Macron only eventually intervene? Like the people at the Louvre are saying, we don't want to do this, but we're afraid to do it because we might get cut up. And does Macron say, well, chances are that you probably can't get away with murdering and sawing the president of France into 35 days? I think that that's the case. But the oligarch hasn't sawn anybody up either. And so, okay, we'll give it a shot and see if it can work. But what a thriller it could be. And just weird. And just once again, maybe it's not right to let the biggest idiots and the vainest people in the world have all the money in the world. You can actually do stuff like, well, I will buy the Louvre and make them do it. And if they don't do it, then I'll cut people up into pieces. I don't know. But it's a much more minor threat to simply just say, I won't let you exhibit the piece. That's fairly acceptable versus the alternative, I guess. I don't know. Very weird story. Very big potential in that story, but I'm making most of it up.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, verifiable, real and true stories coming up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. Dr. Anthony Fauci responded to Tucker Carlson's insistence that the COVID-19 vaccines are not effective. That's good. I'm glad he's getting on top of that. Plus much, much more from around the country and around the world. Nothing quite as lurid as this, I hope, though. See you tomorrow.